I'm excited about today's topic, and I've been doodling this while we've been talking, but we're going to be discussing. But yeah, the school to prison pipeline. And I just discovered I really enjoy drawing these pipelines. And it's not a fun topic, but at least it's kind of fun to draw. Has anyone heard of the school to prison pipeline before I dive into my conversation? So I see Carol and Zach shaking their head yes, Patty shaking her head no, Judith no. Carol, what have you heard? What do you know about the school to prison pipeline? Or also known as the Cradle to prison pipeline?
Yeah, well, I pulled a couple of books off of my shelf by a woman named Marion Wright Edelman. She has been active. She started the Children's Defense Fund. She's a Black woman. Here she is with children.
Right, Edelman.
So this was already back in the 90s. And so basically what it means is that because the school system doesn't serve Black people of color and poor people. I mean, she was very much about racial equality, but also about the helping to eradicate or alleviate poverty. These people are more likely to wind up in prison, but that gets pre-programmed from the time they're cradle, you know, how they're nurtured or not, where they go to school, and how likely they are. I mean, I think you'll have some statistics, it sounds like, Jessica. I mean, how often they're the ones who are likely to be suspended or sent to the principal's office compared to white kids. So they're being programmed for failure from a very young age. And then, you know, as they get to be delinquent age as teenagers, they're more likely to be sent to juvenile detention, and then finally actual prison. Mm-hmm. That's the synopsis of what I know about it.
Well said, thank you. Zach, did you want to add anything about your previous?
No, I think Carol very succinctly summed up my impression of what I did.
Yeah,
absolutely. And for me, I grew up in a town and went to schools where the school to prison pipeline is flowing very healthily, although not in a positive way at all. We had cops in our school. I don't know if anyone else feels that feeling when you drive by a typical US school, like a high school, but they often, to me, look like prisons. You know, they're these huge, big, blocky brick buildings with few windows. And in a lot of cases, depending on the school or in the area that you're in, there will be metal detectors where you have to walk through, or, checks on the students. And
that wasn't growing up, was it?
For me?
When you were young, you had metal detectors?
Not in the nice little, we never had metal detectors in my school, but there was a period where things were very punitive after there'd been some bomb threats or some kids who were messing with everything, and at that period they really cracked down, and it felt like a kind of this antagonistic, almost prison-like environment where you couldn't go to the bathroom without a person on duty, like a hall monitor, giving you the correct amount of toilet paper. Like it was.
Wow. Oh my God.
That happened.
That's prison-ish.
And it is a very majority Black and Hispanic school. And I don't doubt that had something to do with it. But as an educator, and I have a master's in teaching, we learned so much about how the environment that a student grows up in shapes their identity, their expectations of themselves, and eventually plays a huge role in what their life is going to be like afterward. And that's all part of the school to prison pipeline. I'm going to share my screen and show a quick video that I think does a great job of overviewing this. And then we'll kind of draw and discuss and look at some statistics. One thing that's interesting about this particular subject is it also is very, very much affects students with disabilities. So not only Black and Hispanic students, but especially students with disabilities fall into this same pipeline. So I think in the end, it's a sad case of the schools not serving anyone but kind of this white middle class. Like, you have to already be normal in the way that the schools want you to be successful. But let me show you all the video and we can continue.
The state locks up more than 1,000 children each year for minor offenses like truancy.
In these communities where incarceration has become so normalized, the system operates practically from cradle to grave. When you're born, your parent has likely already spent time behind bars. You're likely to attend schools that have zero tolerance policies, where police officers patrol the halls, where disputes with teachers are treated as criminal infractions, where a schoolyard fight results in your first arrest. You find that at a very, very young age, even the smallest infractions are treated as criminal. And that's where it begins. It sends this message that whether you follow the rules or you don't, you're going to jail, just like your uncle, just like your father, just like your brother, just like your neighbor. You too are going to jail. It's part of your destiny. I hate having to lock children up. It is used as a last resort. I don't believe detention is a deterrent with adolescents. We have reduced the population in our detention facilities since I've been on the bench by 30%. We took money and redirected it into the home incarceration electronic monitoring, which allows us to let children go home far more often than it used to.
I'm really sad to say that the data plays out really clearly that once a child is involved with us formally, it increases the likelihood that they continue to be involved with us or move to the adult system. When you hear those doors locked behind you and somebody has to start calling for keys and for numbers every time you move and somebody's watching you 24 hours a day, how do you help but internalize that, especially as a child? How do you help but internalize that this must be my natural habitat?
Oh my gosh, this really gets me, this subject. Because I just feel like it's the opposite of what we're supposed to be doing for our children. And oof.
And so many of the recent killings of Black men have been men with special needs who were misunderstood.
Absolutely.
Which is criminal in itself.
And isn't that kind of the theme behind all of this? You know, we just, we go on the offensive, and this is like the royal I don't know, just the whole big system. There's no time to understand the story behind things. You have a first look and then, I don't know. But it's obviously a very unjust system. I keep thinking when you see some of these statistics we're about to go over and just the stories you just saw, can you imagine, I just think of like, I know so many white middle class moms who flip their stuff over, you know, their kid getting any mistreatment, you know, the teacher treats them just a little bit wrong or incorrectly, or, you know, there's a misunderstanding and it's this huge big deal. Whereas in this other community, in the Black and brown communities, it's just normalized. Like they're saying that, like, oh, this is your natural habitat. And that is very much, I think, a part of why this, this system exists. So just a few facts. And let me show you also real quick before we dive into this, the statistics. Oops, how do I get out of here? Okay. So whenever you're going to be drawing a pipeline, Let me pop myself up here. It's basically just like a kind of cylinder with little like sections on it. You can kind of create your pipeline however you like. I wanted the word pipeline to look like a pipeline. I started here with like 3 little smiley face or sad face kids. The white kid gets a smiley face. White, black, and disabled. I'm going to be illustrating kind of the story of this happening is going through a pipeline. So what does it say? Programmed for failure, injustice, you know, just some kind of notes I've been taking as we go along. And I'll be kind of continuing my page down and making my pipeline snake down the page and just kind of jotting my notes as I go along. So that's sort of the format of my school to prison pipeline sketch for the day to help me remember all this stuff better down the road. And let me show you a picture of a pipeline too. We have them here. It reminds me there used to be like one of the early Microsoft games that was like the first computer game you could play was all about pipelines. So they're pretty approachable to draw. So I encourage you to kind of have some fun with that and create your own pipeline on your page however you like. Here's an interesting one with like little people trying to move the pipeline, stuck in the pipeline. I don't know.
It's too cutesy for me.
Too cutesy? Yeah, this is not a cutesy conversation, that is for sure.
Yeah.
But back to the stats that you may want to illustrate. So this just gets down to injustice, and you can only hope that it is what we've been calling implicit bias. I think so often people can't recognize, you know, I can't imagine that a principal is purposefully expelling Black children at a rate 3 times more than their white peers, but this is what happens. And that's the thing about the state that we're in as a country, as in the world. These statistics don't lie. You know, we look at these numbers and you can't say they're not true, but any one person doesn't feel, you know, guilty for these kinds of injustices. So you can see it starts in preschool. And that's why you can kind of think of this as a cradle to grave situation. As soon as you're born, there's already going to be forces that help have these kids, by the time they get to school, receiving out of school suspension at a higher rate. And I think this also goes back to the way that the school system in particular is built to serve the culture of a middle-class white family. And we talked a little bit in a past class about the difference between Black and white culture. Now, often people who are white don't recognize whiteness as a culture, but there are very clear expectations for the white middle-class culture. And a lot of that is being still, being quiet, especially in school. Those are like the 2 main things, like just sit down and shut up, honestly. And for children of color, there's a much greater cultural emphasis placed on being active, just being more verbal. You know, if you think of like the Black cultural church, for example, there's very much a lot of talking back, you know, like call and response type of like, you know, hallelujah, amen. And that would be the culture that these kids are coming from. And for them to suddenly be in this place where everything they understand is no longer normal and they're actively being punished for it, you know, they don't know any better. These are preschool kids, and it just continues for them.
Well,
and,
sorry.
Go ahead.
I could just say also that from a Waldorf school background, the amount of sitting and academic work that any child gets in kindergarten would be considered offending their nature at that time, whatever color they are.
Absolutely. And the school system is just so antiquated by now, or you know, we're still using a model that came out of training kids to work in factories, to sit in a room and not move for like 8 hours at a time, wait for the bell to ring, just like in a factory, the bell would ring for your lunch break, say yes to the authority figure and not ask questions. Our schools were created to train factory workers, and our world does not look like that anymore. So it's a disservice, I think, also to the country. I can only imagine how much more innovative and advanced we would be if we were upgrading our school system at the same rate of other countries. Like, of course, Finland is known for having the best school system, which looks a lot more like a Waldorf school. There's a huge emphasis on recess and being outside and being physical. We learn through movement as humans very often. And also there's no homework. That's a whole nother story, especially for kids who aren't able to have the support at home if their parents are working, that kind of thing. So yes, all of these statistics, I'm not diving deep into them, but I wanted to just give y'all kind of an overview of some different statistics. And actually I had another video. This one has some tough visuals. So just a warning if you want to not watch it, but I think it also is important to just see what's going on out there, and it has a good overview. So we'll watch this one too while y'all draw.
There's this phrase that you might hear in the news sometimes, the school to prison pipeline. It's shorthand for how schools are funneling students, especially Black students, into the criminal justice system. It started in the 90s when schools responded to fears about crime with zero tolerance policies, which mandated suspensions and expulsions for certain violations. They also cracked down on little things like talking back or uniform violations. The hope was that it would keep bigger problems from bubbling up. But as a result, out-of-school suspensions have doubled since the 1970s, and they keep increasing even though juvenile crime rates have now been dropping for years. Around the same time, the number of police officers stationed full-time inside schools has increased by a third between 1997 and 2007. Ostensibly, they were there to prevent mass school shootings like the one at Columbine, but they end up being a way for schools to basically outsource discipline to the police. Schools with officers have 5 times as many arrests for disorderly conduct as schools without them. Sometimes the results are shocking. But the less visible effect is that schools are feeding the racial disparities in the criminal justice system. Consider the fact that schools are more likely to have an officer on their campus if the student population is more than 50% Black. You might assume that that's because there's more crime at these schools, but although students at police schools are more likely to be arrested, they're not actually more likely to be charged in court for weapons, drugs, alcohol, or assault, at least according to one study. During the 2010-2011 school year, 1 in 6 public school students in the US were Black, but they accounted for 1 in 3 arrests at school. Same goes for other forms of school discipline. Black students are suspended or expelled 3 times more frequently than white students. It actually begins in preschool. 18% of preschoolers are Black, but if all preschoolers suspended more than once, 48% are Black. Studies show that differences in behavior can't fully account for these disparities. Black students and white students are sent to the principal's office at similar rates, but Black students are more likely to end up with a serious punishment. One study found that white students are more likely to be suspended for provable offenses like smoking or vandalism. Black students are more likely to be suspended for subjective offenses like talking back or insubordination. Students who are suspended in school are more likely to later drop out or get arrested. So the federal government is asking schools to make suspension and expulsion the absolute last resort. In Oakland, California, public schools are trying something called Restorative Justice, where both parties in a conflict talk it out with a counselor instead of relying on punishment. The results are pretty encouraging. In the last 10 years, chronic absenteeism is down and graduation rates are up in the schools that have tried it. Other cities and districts are also trying new policies. They're hoping that if their students end up in the criminal justice system, at least it won't be because the schools push them there.
Oh my goodness. So, thoughts on that before continue chatting.
I think it's interesting that I think it's interesting that the whole because when they were talking about having armed policemen in schools as a result of Columbine, like that was my initial thought. Like mass shootings were definitely a thing, and how it's evolved. I don't know. It's not something I've actually actively thought about, the evolution of protection, quote unquote protection in schools.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. One thing I think we also have to consider, and I can't remember what art class this was in, but the prison system as it exists today is, also known as the prison industrial complex, because our prisoners are a huge part of the industrial system. They are workers. They are unpaid generally, or paid just slavishly low. And I say slavishly because this is modern slavery. This is the mechanism by which the new version of people, Black and brown people, being forced to work, being unpaid, being put into this whole prison industrial system unjustly. This is how it works. So it starts, before these children have any opportunity to really create their own lives, have the opportunities that we imagine when we say we live in a country that is like equal opportunity for all. That's not really the situation. If you're unlucky enough to be born into a certain neighborhood where you're going to one of these schools that is over-policed, just like your neighborhood is over-policed, or you're going to have a higher risk of being violently, approached by the police, or approached at a higher rate than you would be if your skin was a different color. Then you go to a school where if you were a white kid and you talked back, it would be a conversation with your parents, maybe detention or something. That same infraction could get you, as you could see, there's some horrifying just physical attacks of police officers in schools that then lead to incarceration, and that cycle continues until they are in the prison industrial complex. It's modern day slavery. So that's what I'm illustrating. Let me go back to my page here.
This is a very drab and dark page.
Yeah.
Not much light in it.
So I'm starting with pencil, but I'm going to come back in a second and go over this in pen, but I hope you can see. So I got my kids here. I just wrote injustice because so much injustice. And then started in the 90s. I thought that was kind of interesting. Cops in schools. What does that say? This isn't how kids learn. Like, newsflash. That's what emotionally gets me so much, is everything that we know about how humans learn. It's not that we don't know any better as a society. We can do better, and it is hopeful. I have a little hopeful bubble over here on the side of the restorative justice programs that are happening in schools like Oakland. Oakland actually is incredibly progressive. Their school system's done some really cool things. Talking back can get you arrested. So that's in my little pipeline. And then finally, my pipeline ends here with slavery by another name, kids ending up in the prison industrial complex. So this is my dark and sad pipeline page. I'm going to keep adding to that. How is it in Mexico, Patty? I was really curious. Is there anything similar to this kind of system? Are jails in any way the same?
No, like schools here are very different.
Mm-hmm.
At least until the time I know.
Yeah.
We have never had police in schools or metal detectors or anything like that. Like normally schools are very, very safe. I don't know. I think one thing that is very important here as a culture is family. So I think that makes a big difference because it's very like, it's a very strong foundation, the family here in Mexico. And families tend to stay together. It's not like in the US that at 18, like most kids go to college in a different place. Like here, it's more like they're still at home. They go to college in their same city. So they don't have to move out. And yeah, for what I know, I've never heard of police being at the schools or anything like that.
So the family support kind of helps them deal with any discipline issues, and there's a accountability, it sounds like, maybe?
I think so.
I have a quick question. Are there ethnic groups in Mexico that are unfairly treated by the
by the police?
Or by the judicial system is actually what I meant to say, by the judicial system. Like, is there inherent prejudice of natives or of, I don't know, people from a different country that would kind of manifest itself in a similar way that that America has kind of, like similar to what America has done?
Yeah, well, here the big issue is social class. Like, yeah, that is a big issue here.
Social what?
Social class.
Oh, yeah.
Like economic status. That I would say that is a problem here. Like, the lower the status, the worse it gets in every sense. And yeah, normally, like, prisons are filled with people from a very low status, like a very low social class. And the people who have money, they tend not to go to prison, or if they go in a very,
like, fancy prison.
Yes.
Familiar? Yeah.
That
interesting.
Different.
It doesn't sound different at all.
Yeah, right.
Just goes to show how much money plays into this.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, as an outsider, but friends who lived out in San Jose de Gracia, right outside of San Miguel, and that town is a very, a poor little town, and they didn't even have electricity or water supply until these last few years. So, they have no economic power, and then they're totally underserved in terms of basic needs, would be my impression.
Yes.
So, so then, and I mean, the schools, I think, are pretty not serving them very well either. So what resources do they then have for making a future?
Yes, that's a big problem here, that then, like, the resource that they find is being a criminal.
Exactly.
They join a gang, they join the drug dealers. Here, like, that is like the biggest issue, because yeah, as you said, Carol, like they don't have support, they don't have resources, nobody cares about them. And then like the big leaders of the cartels get to these areas and they help the people. So they give them, they build, for example, they build a school, or they build a park, or they build a church or something like that. And people in that area are happy because somebody is doing something for them, somebody is seeing them, and then they feel like it's almost a privilege that their kids get to work with that person. Or for example, like if one of these drug dealers, and this is horrible, this is like something really, really horrible, but if any of these drug dealers likes a girl, then it's also kind of a privilege for the family that their daughter is gonna end up with this
drug lord or something.
Yeah, powerful man. That's how they see them. Of course, not everyone, but it happens a lot in these areas that are like so segregated, like nobody, it's the land of nobody. And yeah, that is horrible. And also like the other like horrible thing is that these kids that join the cartels or gangs or whatever, they know what they're getting into. They know that probably they're gonna die very young, but seriously they say things like, okay, I'll live and I'll experience having something even if I die young.
Sure.
Yeah.
It's when you have nothing to live for, I mean, and you have no prospects and no hope. I think that's sadly a universal feeling for so many people who understand that the system is not in their favor. I think that, and here it's like the American dream is becoming less and less of something that feels attainable. And especially, a whole nother conversation is the role models for especially Black kids, kids of color. Like, where do you see powerful, successful men and women? It's going to be more in sports or rap. You have these entertainment avenues where kids can see themselves represented. And we know that when you see yourself represented, like, you tend to feel more confident walking down that path. So there's just not a lot of representation models for young kids to go down what we would, what this big we of like what white society, expects for successful kids.
Jessica, it's interesting. I mentioned Marion Wright Edelman, and I just flipped the book open and tucked this flap in. All our children are affected, and this is true of white ones too, but even more so Black ones. All our children are affected by the absence of enough heroines and heroes. I'm saying it in Spanish, héroes, heroes in public and daily life as the standard for success. For too many Americans has become personal greed. Think covers of Forbes magazine and the people that hold up. Has become personal greed rather than common good, and as it has become enough to just get by rather than do one's best.
Yeah. And I like this is something that I am like, it always like is in my mind. How the hell did we end up like this, like as humanity, you know? Like, how are there billionaires that have like so much that they will never ever in many lives will use the money, yeah, that they have?
Because exploitation is a part of the human, like a societal construct. We always, not we, you, me, people in this call, but humans have always tried to exploit and take advantage. I mean,
in the history that we have.
History of the we, yeah.
Yeah, but how did this happen? Like, how did we end up here?
It's a good question, Patty. Keep asking it.
Yeah.
I'll ask it with you.
Yeah.
Lee, did you have a comment? I saw your hand was up.
Oh, yeah. I just wanted to ask if anyone watched the documentary, The War on Kids. It's a little old now, but I found it very interesting.
No, what's that about?
It's kind of about the same thing of how the school system is failing, but also criminalizing children for very small infractions. So it's very on topic, but it's a little longer.
Where is it available? Do you know, Ellie?
I don't know.
But it's a documentary. I'm writing it down.
You know, I'm just writing this about, you know, how this started in the 90s when there was this heightened crime spree, whatever you call it. There was more crime happening. And then, of course, we were talking about 9/11 earlier, and I was just thinking about how the country reacted so swiftly and strongly to crack down on the way that we go to the airport. And, you know, we, in so many ways, we just up the security and we're so careful about things. And it just got me thinking, because I've also, of course, been reading about pandemic stuff lately, especially in schools. It's so interesting that with the pandemic, we're not having that same reaction of like, let's just be safe, especially here in the South. It's very much like, well, screw that. I want my freedom and I'm not going to give up anything. Like, we gave up a lot whenever 9/11 happened, because we reacted as a country and we unified. And, you know, I don't particularly agree with how strict airport travel is now, but you can see what happened. And go ahead, Zach.
Just that it was politicized, that like this whole situation with the reaction to the pandemic, it was used as a political maneuver, as opposed to, and was played down as a threat. And that's actually coming to light as of like yesterday or 2 days ago.
Isn't that amazing? I'm sorry, Zach, go ahead.
No, it's fine. No, that's it. That's all I had.
It's so amazing that all these people who knew so much waited to put out their books now, 7 months later. It drives me crazy.
Yeah.
Well, some people questioning Woodward's ethics for waiting. Sorry.
Yeah, I know.
What's happened, Patty, is a lot of people who might have spoken up sooner and shifted, you know, people's understanding broadly, instead have made a book deal and are now raking in a bunch of profits.
What?
To share what they know, like, which is just.
Patty, one of them, Woodward, has 9 hours of tapes with our president, in which he admits on tape that he knew in February, March, how bad this pandemic could become, and didn't want to scare people. So he was minimizing it. And so this guy had it on tape 7 months ago and waited to share this till now when this book was coming out.
Oh my God, that's horrible. Like,
I wonder what would have happened if he had shared it then. But I mean, it really does raise a very strong ethical question.
Absolutely.
But I think that Zach,
someone on the View said, I don't know how he slept at night.
Unless he needed to build more trust with Trump in order to get more information, but even still, like, I mean,
well, you guys, it's
I don't know.
It's just about 11. Does anybody want to?
Oh my God!
I know.
Time
flies.
Time flies.
Um,
I've got a pipeline.
Yeah, show me what you got.
So I made my pipeline go all downhill.
Wow, great.
Wow.
Nice.
Oh, I like that.
I did put in what you said about hope it needed, but I didn't get the statistics, but I'll fill in some of the statistics here. So we've got a little black baby in the cradle, and then
yeah, it's all too accurate, unfortunately, but very nicely drawn.
Mine's too light probably for you to see.
Oh, here, let me get yours up. It's a little light, but yeah, that looks great.
Yeah.
Look forward to you posting it when it's.
Look forward to its completion.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it looks good.
Zach, let me pop yours up here. Oh,
Ooh.
yeah.
Oh, I love that.
Oh my God, all the people are actually inside it. That's so
I
cool.
love it.
Good job capturing their little sad buddies, like falling tragically down.
Oh, yeah. When did we do mine? Yeah.
Oh.
What is the in the corner here? Is that a face behind prison bars?
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Good going, Zach.
Thank you.
How few of them get to go to college. Not that college is college is the new slavery of you know, like the industrial, not industrial, but like debtor prison, basically.
Oh yeah, good point.
But that's another conversation. By the way, before we go, and
did we see Patty and Ellie?
No, not yet. Yeah, Ellie, you have yours to share?
Oh, I haven't finished it yet, but I just wanted to say that I actually found the documentary, and it's the full thing is free on YouTube.
Oh, cool.
Oh, fantastic. Thanks, Patty.
It's what?
Thanks, Ellie.
It's free on YouTube. It's called The War on Kids.
Yeah.
Patty, oh, wow. Yours is so happy. So cute.
Yeah, I'm still working on it.
Yeah.
That's strong.
It's very clean.
Strong. Yeah.
It got a nice style to it. Any
Ellie,
subject?
Did we see Ellie?
Oh, she said she had.
Oh, okay. Hope you'll post it then.
Any particular subjects that you would like us to consider for the next few weeks? There's always more, but I thought, it'd be nice to study up on any particular. Yeah.
I have a question. I don't know, would this be too out of the format to like ask to do presentations? Like I'd love to do more work on the lack of Black representation in classical music. I kind of want to go down that rabbit hole and then do like a little bit of a presentation on it. Would that be I don't know, is that the scope of the class? If I could like talk to you maybe and figure out like what's it called? Some kind of, visual that it could accompany it. And I could just do like a presentation on, how do I say? Or, I mean, like, I don't know. I don't know how that could, is that something that you feel like could work?
Yeah, we'll talk.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd be up for that.
Yeah,
or just like,
I'd be really interested in hearing, missing Black musicians. Yeah.
Yes, and Zach just posted an article earlier this morning about that exact subject. So that sounds really cool, and I love the idea of having student presentations.
Yeah, and I have another idea. Not to present, not for me to present, just sharing it. Did you guys hear about the new Oscars?
Oh yes,
inclusion thing.
Yes.
What?
Yes.
No.
That they now have certain
requirements.
Yeah, exactly. Requirements of having people of color, of different races, etc.
Genders, yes. So if you haven't heard, there's this hashtag Oscars So White that's been following the Oscars for years now. So hashtag Oscars So White, because the winners of the Oscars are disproportionately white. The films that are selected to be Best Picture are disproportionately white. There's obviously a huge amount of not just racism, but sexism in movies. And as we all know, representation is huge, and movies are where we see ourselves represented. So what has happened recently is they passed this rule, and it's not going to go into effect for, I think, a year or two, but it's actually quite broad. You have to have like a certain percentage of either the people in the movie or the people who are working on the movie. It could be even an internship program. So there's a lot of different ways that you can fulfill these requirements. It doesn't mean that there aren't going to be any all-white casts ever nominated for Best Picture again, but that's a great suggestion. Thanks, Patty. I will have to go into that. I think that's a good one.
Yeah, because the thing in Hollywood is just like so terrible. When you start looking more into it, there's another thing that it's not about race, but about gender. That I recently, I don't know, a while back, I saw a video about it, about the headless women. Have you heard about that? Like,
no, but I think I know where you're going with that.
Crazy. Like there's this journalist that like she did a very long article about it, and then there was a video or something like that of how many posters of movies are with headless women. So it's just
my God.
Body, just the body, you know?
Oh my God.
Like there are none of just the body of a guy. But it's like, is this thing of, okay, so women are interchangeable, you know, like it doesn't matter who it is. Like it's just a body. It's just a hot body. So it's crazy, but it's crazy to realize the amount that there are of these posters and how it's been so normalized, you know, like, oh yeah, you see a poster of a movie of a woman, like an amazing actress, but it's only her body. You know, doesn't matter who it is.
I'm going to also write down Black women. That's a particularly tough, what do you call it? It's not easy to be a Black woman. And that's the intersection, right, of sexism and racism. But oof, yeah, that's a great suggestion, Patty. Thank you. Cool. And Carol, you have a suggestion?
This is another one about women reading stamps from the beginning. One of the powerhouse anti-racist women who I didn't know about till I read this book is Ida B. Wells. And she's a really forgotten important person as far as I can tell. Reading Kendi's book, but then I looked her up. She was one of the most clearly anti-racist when a lot of the Black people were still assimilationists and etc. So I don't know if we want to, we did portraits of Douglas and to bring up a woman.
I love that. Yes. Thank you.
A historical woman. I mean, I'm in the section now, more modern Angela Davis, but I'm going back a bit to catch up some of the forgotten ones.
Absolutely.
Carol, I lived across the street from the Women's House of Detention on Greenwich Avenue when Angela Davis was in there.
Wow.
Every night, her buddies from her neighborhood would come down and yell up to her the gossip of the neighborhood. It was an amazing experience.
Wow.
All right, friends. Well, I'm going to have to call it. I got an appointment I'm already late for.
Bye, everyone. Have a good week.
Have a great
Bye, everybody. See you next week. Bye.
See you. Bye.